Hey guys, and welcome back to Middle-earth Lore. Today's video is a little different because what I did was I took the entirety of the Hobbit novel and I put it into an AI predictive text writer. This is the same predictive text writer that wrote Harry Potter and What Looked Like a Large Pile of Ash by Botnik Studios. And the way it works is that you just input a text file and it will generate predictive text, and from there it will start building sentences. The only change that I made to it was trying to make the sentence a little bit more coherent so it would kind of somewhat maybe make sense, I guess. Though even then it still is kind of wonky, which does kind of add to it, I think. But yeah, I will probably do a Lord of the Rings one as well if you guys enjoy this video enough. But anyways, without further ado, here is the untold chapter of The Hobbit. The Hobbit, Chapter 20, The Armies of the Misty Market Value. The dwarves were starting on a journey to the door of the mountains. "I'm afraid they belong to the victims, and here you are having breakfast in the kitchen," said Bilbo apologetically. But the dwarves only just started to sing. Gandalf was already off Bilbo's shoulders before dawn. Indeed, Bilbo was so pleased that he made up one yellow slope on the back of the cave. "I must see if we have all the bad luck with the 13 miles of goblins," shouted Gandalf fairly. But in those days of our particular hobbit's heart, the dwarves were grumbling holes in the dark tunnels of the goblins. They had not been part of his dream. This was true enough to find him without that. He had put them there the morning before they were satisfied, and the goblins did not like it at all, plain and clear. Thorin's people, who had both elves and heroes of the north for ancestors, must have taken a fairy wife of the eagles. "What has it got in its pockets?" asked Elrond before he found out of his boat. "What about your promise?" Bilbo replied. "No," said Thorin disappointedly behind a tree. Now carefully and quietly under the stars, the dwarves sprang suddenly on the hobbit. They had stopped pleading for the moment he felt more tired than fish from his toes. "Goodness, thank your mouth for the night comes jolly," Dwalin yelled. Hurtling aside towards them with eyes shining in the air, 10 more hopeful giants came to grab him before Bilbo could think of daisies and cheese. Sting escaped the last fellow, bobbing into each one's heart of mutton. Smaug then began singing about the creature of the jumbled daggers. That way, he could not think of any club of Durin. Then Gandalf climbed down the eyes of goblins, running back to Thorin with his hand on his breast, and the dwarves were on ponies deep with waterfalls in them to disappear quietly under the hill and across the valley. Wolves trotted along the passage of Tom from the Hobbit. It seemed Bilbo forgot everything, until Bombur piled uncomfortably near the fire kicking off a golf tournament. Ahead, the water flows unguarded, hidden by bushes where the wizard slowly flapped into a narrow bird. Thorin and company decided to mince the Elven King and the big barrel of ale they were going to eat for tomorrow's feast. Bilbo had escaped the nearest bedroom invented at the same moment the light of the moon was shining. "No more dreadful owners in the waistcoat of my precious eggs!" cried Bilbo. Within the mountains, spidery belts of rabbits blazed with light. Then Beorn gladly groaned out the commotion to the right direction of Baggins. Grasping it, he pulled dragons from their happy scabbards like lightning or breakfast. But this was not until Radagast of the paraphernalia, beyond the stream of water in nature, had explored Balin's head in his hands. Evidently, Bilbo Baggins hates being alive. Thus he stopped frowning, and rode down the slopes crying farewells and promising to repay the Lord of the Eagles his sofa expenses. Meanwhile, Smaug had just made a great wooden hobbit in muddy branches, and the first smell of tobacco would have brought Bert onto the floor of the cave. But Bard was not quite pleased, nor quite hungry. The dwarves managed to block his eyes palely, and they found one of the terrified guards under Gandalf himself. Bofur went off poof unexpectedly, and Bilbo felt sick of replenishing coins for the sake of Gollum, but now Fili rushed, cracking his skull on the low arc of the passage to the end of the cavern. Thorin had not been part of his comfortable chair before. He placed a smelly sack over his head, and trusted nothing better than a mouse with fire for feet. The day after the same day, very uncomfortable dreams plagued Bilbo when he popped his eyes into his handkerchief, and rode Bill Huggins to find his feet coming swiftly behind Gollum like a game of football. Over the hill, 14 blacksmiths of Buttons had happened to know what was afoot for a long while, before they trottled down into jelly dogs that they heard. Gandalf had explained that men looked towards lowlands where the dwarf cruel people made a deal with trees that charged a fortune. He continued to explain that the forgotten telescopes went back to find something unpleasant, with little birds that were swallowing pans. Balin was getting closer to 11. The armies of the Misty Market Value dropped increasingly. Nothing could feel more slimy than living in Kili. "Well then, Window, Not so delightedly now, snarled Dory after Elrond told him about bed. Bread before dawn. We need chewing like that, said Thorin Oakenshield. Bilbo whistles blew smoke rings that he usually reserved for people who tried to borrow money off of him. Still, the burgling came to a dead stop. Bilbo's brass doorway was not quite so prosy as he liked. It was a ring which he grabbed with his long fingers as quick as thinking equally could allow. Riddles followed him up the sharp stone bridge with fire kicking its brown wizard staff. Bard was driven by his blankets. The others gathered for the last gold coins, standing at an arm's length. When do we know where Mirkwood is? They asked. We don't. 12 dwarves sat down their ponies along the river, and now we must wait for a nasty smell, replied Bard. Untie his head! Bilbo did not dare to sing or talk to keyholes. Baggins and the goblins did not like it, and Stony at the ford, carrying the hobbit, got behind a tree, just behind William's enormous pocket, almost thinking of dragons and goblins and giants and the rescue of princesses. Arrows! Seldom come this way now, called Bard. The people of the one place called Dale had bread and cheese of the mountains. Today, a troll was going to say to Gandalf, this time, he did not know it was Gandalf at all. Supper is preparing over there. They had not got to the point to which our pass would have liked to. I had a few private words with these people that seemed to show that the music began to get frightened of them, Thorin told Gandalf. Doran's Day, all the dwarves said. Bilbo was getting angry now, so they pushed all their chairs back to the boat and shot off from a cannon by the inn one fine morning, just before tea.